Hey everybody, welcome back to Living Traditions Homestead. Well, we are enjoying kind of a cool down here on the homestead this morning. For a change, our temperatures are only in the high 70s, maybe low 80s, and it looks like it's going to be that way for the next couple days, which is a real nice break from the heat wave that we've been having.
We had some rain this morning for about, I don't know, an hour or so. I think we got about an inch, so it rained hard for just that amount of time. But that was very welcome because things have been pretty dry and dusty around here.
Yeah, it's been a really hot, dry, I'd say last
couple weeks.
3 weeks probably.
Yeah, maybe.
So the rain was definitely a nice addition this morning.
We're coming to you today with a Q&A video. It's been a little bit since we've put one of those out, and recently we've had a lot of questions following a couple of our videos about growing in the garden and those kinds of things. So today we gathered up a bunch of those questions and we're going to sit down and answer them for you.
But before we jump into the gardening questions, a lot of you were asking about the kind of mini vacation that Sarah and I went on the couple days ago. As you know, we don't get off of the homestead very often. In fact, this was the first time in 8 years that we have spent any time away from our homestead for more than, I mean, we'll go somewhere for a day, but overnight, this is the first time in 8 years that Sarah and I have just gotten away and been able to kind of stay away from doing chores and everything else.
We went to the lake for basically exactly 48 hours
right.
to do some fishing. Kevin and I love to fish. We spent a lot of time fishing when we were dating. We'd like to do more of that in the future, but it was a good time for just that short amount of time.
Yeah, it was extremely hot, so the fish weren't biting really well, but we were able to get, you know, a fair amount of fish. I caught one nice bass, a nice catfish, we caught some bluegill, and then a bunch of just smaller things that we had to throw back. But it was a good time, and it was a nice break from doing the same chores every single day.
That's right. So today we're going to get into some of those questions that you all have left us in the last couple of videos.
Now, whenever we do videos like this, we try to pick questions that get asked multiple times. So we may be kind of paraphrasing a question that many of you have asked us over the last month or so. The first question is really about how do we water in our garden and in our greenhouse. Now, for those of you who have been following us for a long time, you probably know the answer to these questions already, but recently we've had a lot of new people start following our channel, which we are so appreciative of. And so if you haven't gone back and watched some of our old videos, you may not know all of this information. So in our big garden, we actually water with what's called drip tape irrigation. Drip tape irrigation is a system that uses very low water pressure, but it waters very efficiently, and you can do it over a large area to get the water right at the ground level. But in the greenhouse, we use something a little different. We use little drip emitters. I actually just did a video about this about a week or so ago.
Right.
You can go back and check that out. We've also done several videos about the drip tape irrigation system, how to set it up, how all the different parts work, all of that. So go back and check out some of those older videos if you want to learn the real specifics about how to use those types of irrigation.
Along the same lines, we've been asked several times recently, how often are we watering and how long of a time frame are we watering? Now, in the big garden, in the in-ground garden, we are watering every other day for 2 hours on the drip tape irrigation system. Now, we have found over time that watering for longer periods of time, less often, actually works better for our plants than watering for a short amount of time every day or twice a day.
Right.
It gives that water an opportunity to really sink down into the ground and thoroughly water the roots, and it encourages the roots to grow deep, which will make them more hardy. Also, by not watering every day or twice a day, you're reducing evaporation, and so more of your water is getting down and staying down into the ground if you do it for a longer period of time, less often. Now, in the greenhouse, we're watering in buckets, so evaporation and drainage happens a lot faster. So we need to do a different kind of watering schedule. And right now, since it's been so hot, we've been watering every day for 6 minutes per row. So every bucket is getting watered through its emitter for 6 minutes a day.
The bottom line is, when you're trying to figure out how much you need to water, it's going to depend a lot on where you live, you know, your weather, your temperature, how much rain you're getting. You really just need to pay attention to your plants.
Right.
And you need to adjust your watering schedule for what works on your place. What works here may not work for someone 3 miles up the road if their garden gets a lot more shade, or they just have a different type of soil. So you really need to adjust your watering to what works in your garden.
Now, we've also had a lot of questions recently about the woven weed fabric that we use in our in-ground garden. And we have been using that weed fabric for probably 4 years now. For a long time. We absolutely love it. We've done so many videos about the woven weed fabric over the years. But like we said, there are a lot of new followers who haven't seen that before and have questions about what it's called and where to get it.
Right. So the weed fabric that we use, that we've used this entire time, is made by a company called DeWitt. The actual, like, I guess, model would be called, it's DeWitt Sunbelt weed fabric. We've used it in our outside gardens, we've used it in our greenhouse, we use it underneath our raised beds. It works so well, and we would highly recommend it. It comes in a variety of sizes. Originally we used 3-foot wide, but most recently now we've switched to actually using a 15-foot wide roll of it.
The shorter widths of it, you can get either on Amazon, you can get it from growersolution.com, but the longer widths of it, the 15 feet, can't easily be gotten online. Obviously, it's not easy to ship. So we recommend that you look in your local area for landscaping companies or greenhouse companies to see if they offer it.
Right. We actually buy ours through a wholesaler out of Springfield, Missouri. And we can do that because we're a farm, because we're a registered agricultural business.
Right.
So we can order through an agricultural wholesaler.
Right.
If you're just a backyard gardener and don't have an agricultural business, yeah, like Sarah said, maybe look for a local greenhouse, like a local nursery or someone who might be able to order it for you. You might end up paying a little bit more, but it might be worth it so you can get the wider stuff if that's what you want. Now the next question we got asked a couple times, and it's about the fence around our garden. If you've watched our old videos, you've noticed that we've always had an electric fence around the garden, but this year for some reason we don't.
Well, the real answer is we will. We just haven't yet.
Right.
The big animals like deer and coyotes and that kind of thing, they cannot get through the double fence system that we have around the garden area. We call it our chicken moat. It surrounds our garden area, the orchard, and a future area that we'll be planting grapes and berries. So we don't have to worry so much about those, but it will not keep out small animals that may eat our vegetables like squirrels, rabbits, groundhogs, those kinds of things. While we have not had any problems yet, we foresee that being a problem, especially with the raccoons, once we get the cantaloupe and the watermelon, once they can smell those things. Oh, and the corn. We'll definitely need to bring out the electric fence. We use a poultry netting from, what company is that called?
Premier One.
From Premier One. We use a solar energizer to power that. So within the next, I don't know, week or two, I guess, when we have time, we'll bring that over from the homestead and put that around the garden here. So the next question is also about the woven weed fabric. The question is, doesn't the black woven weed fabric make the soil heat up faster and also evaporate the water faster?
Right. I think this is a big misconception because a lot of people think of the woven ground cover as the same as like a solid black plastic that you would put over a piece of ground to kill out the grass and things. What you really need to do is kind of change your thinking of that. There's two kinds of things that you could think about. First of all, because this woven weed fabric is woven, you can think of it as like a shade cloth.
Right.
So if you think of it like a highly tightly weaved shade cloth for your ground, that's really kind of how it's acting. So just like the shade cloth over our greenhouse is black, it's not making our greenhouse hotter, it's actually making it cooler.
Right.
So because this is woven on the ground, it's actually shading the ground underneath it like a mulch would do.
Right.
And it's keeping the ground cooler underneath the plastic than it would if there was no plastic at all.
And because it's basically shading the ground, it's preventing excess evaporation. So it's actually like a mulch, is keeping the ground more wet.
We've actually done a video in the past that you guys can go back and check out where we took a thermometer, we measured the temperature underneath the weed fabric, and we measured the temperature, you know, just a couple feet away where there was no weed fabric, and the ground was actually cooler under the woven ground cover than it is out in just like the normal dirt. So that just kind of proved the point that the woven ground cover is acting like a mulch and keeping the ground cooler underneath it.
The next question has to deal with the time of day that we're watering. People are asking, should you water at night? Should you water in the morning? Apparently there is some controversy about what's best or what you should and shouldn't do. You know what? We water our big garden at night and we water our greenhouse in the morning. And really that's just a scheduling thing for us and when it's gonna work out best. Honestly, in our opinion, it really doesn't matter if you water in the morning or if you water at night. I do know that watering in the heat of the day is not the best time. It's not the best time for overhead watering for sure, because those water droplets can magnify and burn the leaves of your plants. But also it's the hottest part of the day and you'll lose water to evaporation.
So again, I think the bottom line is, just like a lot of things on your homestead, you guys, you need to do what works for you.
Right.
If you're, you know, if you have your watering system on a timer, then set it for whichever one you think is great. But if you water by hand and you work till midnight every night, then water in the morning.
Right.
If you go into work at 4 o'clock in the morning, then water in the evening when you get home.
Right.
You guys, I think a lot of times people make things way more difficult than they need to be. And the bottom line is, you need to do what works for you and your homestead, and everything else will just kind of work itself out.
Okay, the next question is actually just kind of like a group of questions. Apparently, all of a sudden this year, people are having a hard time with moles, voles, gophers, and ants, because all of a sudden we're getting flooded with questions about them. We have some experience with most of those,
right,
and we can just tell you what we've done to help and kind of our opinion on those things.
Right. So let's start with ants. Here in Missouri, we haven't had a big problem with ants in our garden. We did have some problem with ants in our garden when we lived in Arizona. We had fire ants in the garden, but they're not really a problem with the plants. You know, they might be a problem if there's a big anthill and you step on it and you get bit while you're in the garden. But really, you guys, I think people freak out way too much about ants in the garden. For the most part, ants aren't going to bother your garden plants.
Right. If you're seeing ants on your plants, look closer and see if you have aphids, because they have kind of a symbiotic relationship. Once you get rid of the aphids, the ants should leave your plants alone. I think in general, ants are more of a nuisance rather than a garden pest.
Right.
So we don't really worry about ants at all.
Now the next part of this is about moles and voles. I think a lot of people get these two animals confused. They blame a lot of things on moles that really shouldn't be blamed on moles, because moles will not eat your garden plants. They're not under the ground eating all the roots off your plants. They're not, you know, pulling them under the ground and eating them like you see on the cartoons. Moles really are insect eaters.
Right.
They will eat grubs, they'll eat bugs that live underground. They may make tunnels in your garden, which might be annoying, and it might make some of your soil sink in. Mm-hmm. They might occasionally make a hole or make a tunnel right down a row of your plants that could affect your plants,
right,
but they're not purposely doing it to hurt your plants.
Right. Voles, on the other hand, those are the buggers that do eat the roots of your plants, or they'll eat your carrots and, you know, root plants.
Right.
We haven't had any problems with voles anywhere that we've gardened, and we don't have experience getting rid of them, so I'm super sorry that we don't have an easy solution for voles.
Right. We do occasionally get moles in our garden.
Right.
For the most part, we just don't do anything about it, and they usually move on within a little while.
Yeah,
I don't think they seem like they're super territorial. You'll find a couple tunnels every once in a while, and then they're just kind of gone.
Yeah, I have actually planted in mole tunnels, but basically you just smash the soil back down and plant your plant.
Right.
You know, as long as you're not planting in a tunnel where your plant's roots are in just air, you shouldn't have a problem with the moles.
Right. And then the last thing is gophers. We don't have gophers here in the part of Missouri that we're in, but we did when we lived in Phoenix, and they can be a nuisance. Yes. They dig deep holes. They can really tear things up.
And they will eat your plants and your root vegetables.
Right, yeah. So gophers can be a real problem. What we did in Arizona is we used the little traps that you basically dig down into their tunnel, and it's like a double-sided mouse trap almost, where if they run through it, it catches them on the inside, and then you can get rid of them that way. But I'll be honest, it was like kind of a never-ending battle with gophers.
Yes. The next question is, what do we do with the weeds that we pull out of the garden? Our last video, I was doing a lot of weeding during the video, and you saw the weeds and stuff kind of pile up in the rows, right. And then I kind of swept them away. You know what, you guys? Honestly, we like throw them in the yard, in the grass. They dry up, and the next time Kevin mows, they get mulched up and returned to the earth that way.
Right. Yeah, there's not some big secret. We tend not to put weeds in our compost pile because we don't want weed seeds in the compost. We could give them to the chickens or something like that, but to be honest, because our chickens already have so much grass, throwing weeds to them isn't a treat. You know, they just kind of look at it and are like, thanks. I mean, it's not a treat when you give it to something that they have so much access to already. So Sarah's right. We just usually mow over them and mulch them up.
We also got a question. There's a family that will be moving to our area, and they're wondering what can they plant in kind of mid-summer to fall. You know, have they missed the opportunity to garden altogether because they're moving here in the summer? And the answer is, you haven't missed out at all. The wonderful thing about our area is we have a long growing season, right. And pretty much everything that you can grow in the spring that you think of as spring planting, like lettuce, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, turnips, rutabagas, all of those like spring plants, you can also plant for fall. Now, all of those plants and seeds can be put into the ground here at the end of July, early August. Now, like the brassicas, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, those should be put in as transplants, but turnips, rutabagas, spinach, lettuce, those can be planted from seed at that same time. Right.
It may seem kind of weird to plant some of those things during hot weather, but if you want a fall harvest, that's when you need to get those started.
Now I want to share with you some really great information. The University of Missouri has a vegetable planting calendar that is fantastic, and it will tell you what time frame to plant all of your plants in the spring, in the summer, and in the fall. So I recommend you look that up, and you can have that information at your fingertips.
So the last question that we're going to answer today isn't really about the garden. It's about our hoop coops that we built for our chickens several years ago.
At least 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago we already built those. We've had a lot of questions about them because I think a lot of people are building them. They want to know, do we have any trouble with the wind ever blowing them over? Does the tarps that we put over the top rip in the wind, or have they, you know,
degraded?
Have they degraded over time? What was the other? Have we had a problem with predators digging underneath them? So we're going to try to hit on all of those real quickly. First, wind. No, we've never had the wind blow them over. You guys, they are heavy. Yeah. They are, because they're all 2x4s and cattle panels, I mean, they're heavy. They're not made to be portable. In fact, I have a heck of a time even moving them with my tractor because they're that heavy.
When we moved them, we built them at the homestead, and then we moved them to this farm property. When we moved them, we actually had 4 adult men that had to pick it up to put it onto the trailer to haul to the farm. So they are very heavy.
Right. And we get strong winds here in Missouri, especially here on the farm property, because we're kind of at the top of a hill. It gets really windy. We've never had them move. We don't have them anchored or anything. They just sit and do a really good job.
And they haven't ripped either.
Right. Yeah, another question was about the tarp that we put over the top. Now, we didn't use a tarp. We used old billboard material, which is a lot thicker than a tarp. And no, it's never ripped. We've never had any problem with that. I would think if you were using an actual tarp, you may have to replace it every year. Things that we've used tarps on in the past, tarps just don't hold up long term. So I would think maybe you'd have to replace that more often. But the stuff that we used, we haven't had to replace at all in 3 years.
We also have never had a predator dig underneath it to get to the chickens. Now, I'm not saying that that couldn't happen or that won't ever happen. We just haven't had that problem. Maybe it's because now they're within the chicken moat area. Maybe that gives them some level of protection, but we just haven't had that problem.
Right. If you live in an area where you have that problem a lot, if you think you have a lot of predators who would dig, you could definitely put chicken wire on the bottom of the hoop coops and then just put your bedding on top of that so that if something does dig, it can't get back up on the inside. But other than that, I think you'll be fine.
So you guys, those are a bunch of questions that you guys have been asking recently. We're so happy to be able to sit down and answer those for you. We really do enjoy this time to answer questions. You know, a lot of times we don't have time to sit down at the computer and answer all the questions from all the comments that we get on all of our videos. So this is a great opportunity for us to do that, answer questions that multiple people are having.
So you guys, thanks for spending some time with us on the homestead today. Now that we are back, we need to get back to work. We have a couple days worth of things to catch up on, but we've had a good time getting away for just a couple days. Hey, we hope that you are enjoying our channel and enjoying our videos. Don't forget that the absolute best way that you can help us here on the homestead, as always, is just to share our videos on all of your social media so that other people might be able to enjoy them as well. Until next time, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care and God bless.
God bless.